Welcome back to Healing Mindset. I am Nasish, and today we are entering a conversation that invites us to rethink how we grow, evolve, and awaken. I am joined by amazing Richard Smith, author of A Phenomenal Life and the creator of The Orbits of Consciousness, a framework that reveals something profound. Our emotional and spiritual growth isn't linear, it's orbital. We move through cycles of protection, awareness, compassion, expansion, often revisiting stages with new wisdom each time. Richard brings a grounded, non dogmatic lens to spirituality, making deep ideas feel accessible, practical, and deeply human. This conversation is an invitation to understand yourself with more curiosity and far less judgment. Richard, welcome to Healing Mindset. I am so glad to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me, Nazish. I'm really pleased to be here too.
You're very welcome. So, your orbits of consciousness framework reframes growth as cyclic rather than linear.
Yes, yeah. So it came about just through the coaching that I was doing with doing one-to-one coaching and so training people as well. And I'd noticed that the way that people grow, the way that develop, that I used to see them, especially through coaching conversations, would move them from one place to another. And it's almost I was thinking I began to ask myself, well, where were they before and where did they move to and what was happening? And that's when I started to see these like different levels of possibly consciousness. And then people through coaching and through other practices as well, we can move through these. And sometimes we feel very expansive and sometimes we feel very closed and trapped almost within our own gravity.
That's beautiful. And tell me that when you recognize these orbits in your own life, did anything about your inner narrative shift right away?
Within my own life, yeah, because I began to recognize it's a bit like, Nazish, when you put on some, say, red tinted glasses, everything you see is tinted red, right? So when we are in any particular orbit, that's how we see the world. And when we're fearful, everything makes us scared. And when we are feeling, I don't know, but when we were feeling really open and really, like vibrant and clear, that's how we see the world as well. So very much I recognize that, the however we are now, whichever orbit we're in, that's only how we understand the world at that moment. But we must understand there are other orbits which we could possibly be in. And I call them orbits because the way I picture it is a three-dimensional, much like the orbits around an atom or around a planet. You can get to different heights and it can go in any direction as well.
Hearing you helps our listeners reflect on their own repeating cycles with more compassion, which is something that all of us have been wanting to do for a long time. You describe the early orbit as ego driven protection. What does the orbit actually feel like for most of the people in their daily lives?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. And we all have spent time in those orbits, and I call them the ones which are really close to like the lowest orbits. And so, yeah, I call them really ego associated because that's when we are in really periods of depression or grief or fear or self-loathing or when we're very judgmental about ourselves, and while to tell, I call the lowest orbit their dark places because you would say that someone is in a dark place, right? That's when it's very hard for them to come out by themselves. They usually need some type of intervention, maybe some sort of therapy, or it could be just heavy grief that we're going through, and we just have to work our way through that grief. So when people are in there, the world feels very small. We want to withdraw from the world, and it's not a very friendly place, and we're not in a good place, and we're not easy to communicate with, and all these things about it. So it's really not, it's the lowest orbits are not ones we'd want to. And the further we get away, the less attached to our own ego we are, and the more that we can sort of let go of that, the higher we can get. And that's kind of like what the book is about, and it's about the reconnection to what's much bigger than us.
That is very beautifully said, and that is such an accurate description. it is familiar for so many of us, but yet it is often invisible. And the way you put it, it feels like something is there that we can all do and work on. So do people usually realize that they are in this orbit, or does the awareness only arrive once they begin moving beyond it?
I think one of the problems is that as say that's how you see the world when you're there, and when people do move out, and they the five basic levels I talk about are the dark places, the one that I mentioned. Then there's the orbit of the oppressed, and in that place, people are still it's still not a very good place to live, and you certainly feel oppressed. You feel oppressed by what's happening to you. But at least there is some room to move, and there's some room, to you're a bit further away from the center. And then the next one up is the orbit of sustaining. That's where most people are most of the time, the orbit of sustaining. So what I mean by that is that's where, things could be better, but they could be worse as well. And we can operate at that level. And sometimes we could be happy. Sometimes we'll still be too judgmental. And sometimes we might get cross with people or even ourselves and, self-judgment. And then the higher level above that, wholesome existence, I call that. That's where we want to try and get to live our lives, because that's the place where everything is so much calmer. There's no anxiety. We feel connected to other people and to the world around us. And if we're very lucky and we keep avoiding those little traps to stop us, we can even go up to the highest level, which is spiritual orbit. And within that orbit, that's where that's really where there is real peace and everything makes sense and absolutely no judgment and everything is just it'd just be a wonderful. And I think we all have had experiences of being in that orbit too from time to time, through our connection through religion or through awe is a really good place to go with that. When you're standing there looking at an incredible sunset, we find ourselves in that orbit just for a short amount of time, and it's a wonderful experience. And so we move between these all the whole time.
That is very well put. This insight really helps people identify this stage not as a flaw, but as a part of being human. So, yeah, as someone begins moving into the orbit of compassion and connection, what becomes possibly that simply wasn't accessible before?
Ah, yes. So you're absolutely right. We are human. This is our human existence, and so we will be finding time. And we know the things which cannot do us, not serve us well. But when we do find ourselves there, why does the world look different? Because we just feel more connected. We do to ourselves. I talk all about the three phases. The first thing we need to do when we move upwards, we need to try and connect better with ourselves, and that's our own feelings, emotions. It's literally so we know what's going on. We mustn't be numb to our own feelings. And then when we connect to ourselves, we then can connect to other people too. And once we connect to other people, that's when we find that we can start relating and things we see ourselves in. It's just things our consciousness expands there. And then finally, when we can connect to the world around us, connect to whatever you want to call it, the divine, the universe, whatever you want to, your own God, whatever you want it to be, that's fine. When we can connect to that higher level, that's when we just feel so much more open and free, and yeah, we can still fall into the traps and we can find ourselves withdrawn back in again. And that's just as you so beautifully put it, that's the part of the human experience. But I think, if once we have this idea of our map, or that we can use, we can try to spend more time, extend our time in the higher orbits and try to limit our time in the lower orbits.
I love how you explain that. So tell me, was there a particular experience or a shift that tends to pull people naturally into this more expansive space?
I think the single most important thing um, is is the connections that I spoke about. I talk about between the orbit of sustaining and the wholesome existence. I call it the ceiling of judgment, because if we continually are judging ourselves, judging other, every time we make a judgment, we're separating ourselves from the other, whether the other is ourself or other people or the world around us. So by stopping judgment, and I know it's very easy to say, "Stop, let's not be judgmental," but actually it really is. It's a great boost to the ego, and, because of what it does, it separates us from the ego, and so it means we can move more freely. So for me, that's the single most important thing people can do in order to spend more time. Now it's easier said than done. I know that people, certainly in this country, people enjoy the judgment. It's something they think you can get medals for, but really, actually, all it does, it traps us in the orbits which we don't really want to be in.
That is very nicely put. And to be honest, I feel like this journey, like everything that you said, that makes the journey feel organic and not forced. And that is something really reassuring for our listeners. One of your one of your idea that really stands out is that we revisit orbits rather than transcend them forever. Why do you think growth involves returning to earlier stages instead of permanently leaving them behind?
Ah, yes. It would be wonderful if we could permanently leave them behind, but much like Jack Cornfield wrote in his book After the Ecstasy, the Laundry, we have to come back to real life, and real life will we need to make plans. We need to do things. We need to have interactions with people, and of course, we need people in different places to us as well. And okay, I do believe that either we lift them through our presence, or if we're not careful, they can like reduce us, diminish us through their presence. So it's important to stay very present the whole time and to try and do the best we can with that. So yeah, we do come back and we do learn as well. And the more we have the pathways open for expansion, I think the easier it is then to move out again. So when we do find ourselves, having a bad day or feeling, you know, a bit overwhelmed, possibly, we know that there's a better place that we can reach if we apply ourselves the right way and we can follow the right practices. And I know all your listeners do this already. I know they will try to find a place of peace where they can just reconnect, and that's where they can lift themselves again within.
That is something our listeners will be really excited to do. And listening it from someone so experienced and so well versed about these things, it is amazing. It is actually very reassuring, to be really honest. So, when someone finds themselves returning to an earlier orbit, how can they interpret that without feeling like they have regressed?
I think it's the compassion that you mentioned. I think to have compassion for where we are, or the person that we used to be when we were in that orbit before. Um, and it's the compassion which will immediately start acting like a hot air balloon and lifting us out again. So we mustn't ever forget that just because we're wearing a different color shade of glasses, that doesn't mean to say we can't take them off and see the world in a different color or in a different light or with much more clarity. So yeah, I think the self-compassion just means that we can realize that it's the impermanence of any state we're in. It's impermanent. And yeah, sometimes it means we're going to go down again, but also it means we're always inevitably going to rise again out of the orbit that we're in.
That explanation really lifts so much pressure from so many people up. And the deeper orbits you describe touch awe, spaciousness, spiritual clarity. For someone hoping to anchor this in their daily life, where does that begin with?
Okay, yeah. So the things that we find, and so what I say in these outer orbits, I've mentioned like the compassion is rich there, like equanimity. So things which means we're not going to be upset by little things that go wrong. The awe that we can find, just peace, and this is a feeling of connection. So yeah, it's the feeling of connection to the whole world, and I think when we try and find those moments, and people do it already, I know they do when they go for a walk in nature, they do this because they want to lift themselves and get that connection back with something bigger than themselves. So yeah, we all know what it's like to be there. If we could spend like 24 hours solids in that sort of orbit, then we would be you know it would be an incredible experience, but I don't think it's possible because we're human, and because we're human, we have the human traits. But hey, I think we're very blessed with every any particular time we can spend in the higher orbits.
That is actually very true. And how I love how you make it sound so accessible and just like it's just amazing. And once someone begins to embody this deeper orbit, what subtle markers tend to show up? Like how do they know it is becoming lived or not just understood?
I think they feel it rather than it's not what they see, it's what they feel. It's the connections that they feel, it's the calmness that they feel, it's the beauty that they can feel and see and experience around them. Beauty in everything, you know, like if you it's always around us the whole time, but sometimes because we're wearing the different color glasses, you know, because we are in the lower orbits, we just don't see this. So it's a bit like radio waves we can't pick up on. When we are in that spiritual orbit, we can pick up on greater things, whereas we can't hear them when we are not, you know, in that sort of place. And I think that people feel that, you know, you can. We've all been there when, you know, you can be walking in an amazingly beautiful place. You're feeling calm. You've got some friends by your side. You know, everything is perfect, and yeah, then you just feel just totally at home and connected, and that's where I think we know. Yeah.
That is true. And, feeling at home and everything that you are mentioning is something that is so important for all of us to feel. And I feel like a lot of our listeners will be able to understand this and relate with it more closely. So, Richard, your works bring such clarity to inner landscapes we all navigate. For our listeners who want to explore more about the orbits of consciousness or dive deeper into your book, A Phenomenal Life, where can they find you?
So yes, thank you. So the book actually is out this week. It's it came out on the digital version yesterday or today, and then it's out on Monday with the other version as well. And there's going to be the website there, the landing page. It's literally, I mean, I know it's being built right now, so this is how new the whole thing is. And that's a phenomenal life .com and and a phenomenallife.co.uk. And within that, people can certainly access the orbits of consciousness. There's going to be a model on there, interactive, so they get a much better idea of what I've been talking about. Because I think it is a very visual image, so that people can see the difference in how we move outwards and how we move back inwards as well. And I think if that just can be used by anybody as a map to sort of like help them understand themselves and how other people are, and it might just give some, you know, it might help some of that compassion that we should have for ourselves. Yeah.
That is amazing. And I will make sure to include all these links and your details into the show notes so that many, many people will be able to reach out to you.
Well, thank you.
So, thank you, Richard, for guiding us through this exploration of orbits of consciousness. To everyone listening, let this be your reminder that your growth is not meant to be straight ascent. It is a series of returning, expanding, dissolving, awakening again and again. Each orbit brings its own wisdom. So take a moment today to notice which orbit you are moving through and honor the insight it is offering you. Until next time, I am Nazish and this is Healing Mindset.